The glitz, the glamour. Late 80s and early 90s represented the peak of adventure, of exploration, of living that high life, of events and commercials pushing the limits of man and machine. And when Honda came out with their new Dominator platform, they needed a way to spread the word. The event that transpired from that desire still stands as a unique, one-of-a-kind milestone.
In fact, a promotion that went so well, the main sponsor had to shut it down. After a swift, short few years, it became too popular. This is the story of the Honda Dominator and, even more importantly, of the Camel marathon bike.
It all started with a man and a question. Beppe Gualini. After doing multiple Dakars and Camel Trophy events, he started wondering, why was there nothing alike for the two-wheelers? If you think about it, motorcycles represent the quintessential adventure machine. Having the ultimate adventure be the four-wheeler trophy was odd. So Beppe decided to go to the press officer of Camel Italy with a revolutionary idea. Why not recreate the Camel trophy, but with motorcycles instead?
Now, obviously, one does not simply go to the press officer of one of the world's biggest brands of that time. No. In order to understand the true nature of this event, we need to understand who Beppe really was.
A real pioneer, he had raced many editions of the Dakar Rally on two wheels. Later, Beppe discovered the Camel Trophy, which led him being deeply invested into the event. His entire life was dedicated to wheels, engines, and adventure. Over the course of his career, he took part in more than 50 African rallies. You see, his experience meant two things. On one hand, he knew what a true adventure should feel like.
But second, he had gathered the connections throughout the industry. And that's how he was able to go to the tobacco company directly and pitch his crazy idea.
What exactly was this crazy idea I keep mentioning? Given Beppe's experience, he decided to create the ultimate adventure test of man and machine. A 10-day event unlike any other. He started by basing the navigation on a rally-style roadbook. Each day, competitors would have to face one special test along their way. Some were easy, some were hard, and others were outright impossible. In fact, at one point, no rider could pass through such obstacle with the exception of one person who had previous trials experience. And so he had to cross 8 bikes over the treacherous mountain pass. Another time, the route chosen by Beppe meant that competitors required oxygen masks in order to keep pushing their bikes through. And then sometimes the path would simply disappear. And that was the challenge. Crews had to build their own bridges, create their own zip lines. In today's world governed by health and safety, this would be unimaginable. But back in the 80s, they were doing it for real.
My point is, this incredible race envisioned by Beppe wasn't a rally race. It wasn't an enduro. It was the ultimate adventure test.
A challenge for man and machine, but also a test of camaraderie. These weren't professional riders, they didn't come from motocross tracks. That's why the event featured 2 trophies. One for the shortest overall time, and second for companionship. The Spirit Trophy. And then there were the motorcycles. Beppe went to Honda in search for technical support, and the timing couldn't have been any better. You see, Honda Italy had the perfect adventure machine, as they had just come out with the new Dominator. And Honda had a problem.
They needed a way to promote their new machine. Look, the Domi by itself is not exactly the most inspiring motorcycle. No, the bike itself was never going to be the star of the show, but it was an enabler. That was the real story of the Dominator. Also, the real story of the subscribe button. Cheers.
On the face of it, the motorcycle was nothing groundbreaking. A single-cylinder, air-cooled thumper developing a whopping 45 horsepower. I'm sure if you look up the dictionary definition for reliability, Honda's 650 engine would be the first to show up. And that philosophy carried around to the rest of the bike. Its features included a trip meter, a tachometer, handguards, and that's about it. Look, this was a bike built with a strict budget in mind, but a bike that was supposed to never break down, to never leave its owner stranded.
You see, Honda had this perfect machine ready for Beppes' project. But in reality, the main reason was that Honda Italy really needed a way to promote it more.
The Africa Twin was taking all the headlines, so this was a way for them to showcase the real capabilities of its little offspring. And little it was, coming in at just 178 kilos with a full tank of gas. Look, it was never a dirt bike, but compared to the pigs of the 80s and 90s, this was more akin to a ballerina than a hippo. In preparation, Honda Italy gave the motorcycles a slightly longer suspension travel alongside custom valving. They also fitted an aero exhaust, and that's about it. Yeah, actually, for what was going to be the most extreme adventure event, the bikes were surprisingly mild.
Here comes another fascinating part. You see, one couldn't simply pay and join the race. If you thought modern Dakar requires a lot of steps to go through, think again. For the first year, Beppe devised a multi-step selection process.
People had to buy motorcycle magazines, in which they would find a form. Then they would cut out the paper, fill in the form and post it to Camel Italy's headquarters. That year, more than 10,000 applicants signed up for the adventure. From those, only 50 were chosen for the next step. Here, they were taken to a motocross track, where a panel of judges evaluated their motorcycle competencies, both on and off the road. From those, the top 12 moved on to the third stage of the selection process. At the Bologna Motor Show, Camel had another set of tests, ranging from physical to orientation and bike handling skills.
And from those 12, only 2 pioneers were chosen to test the first edition of the Camel marathon bike. Out of 10,000 people, only 2 managed to get through.
1987 represented the first edition, but it wasn't that much of a race. Look, this was a proof of concept and a marketing stunt at the same time. They flew the contestants to Baja California, where the Italian crew took part in Beppe's special tests. But even that controlled, sanitized environment carried some big challenges. In one of the days, because of the air filters they were using, their Hondas started losing power. So the crew decided to remove the filter altogether. This did bring them home, but also meant they had to change the engine the same night. Look, especially the first edition, this wasn't a race, but it was a crucial event because it showed everyone the potential of such expedition. So, for the second year, 2 Italian crews and 1 Spanish duo were chosen to compete in Zer. Beppe took them through inhospitable places, through villages that had never seen outsiders before. It was, indeed, the ultimate adventure. For the third year, the event moved to Peru, featuring 4 teams battling it out. These teams had to take care of their own motorcycles. They had to be the riders, the mechanics, the navigators, builders. Any outside help was penalized. You see, at this point, the marathon bike was more than just a marketing stunt. It was the ultimate adventure race, and its popularity was booming.
That's why, for the 4th year, France wanted to take part as well. Not much later, Germany announced their intention to send a crew. And with this newfound glory, out of the blue, Camel International decided to cancel the event. For good.
The greatest adventure was no longer a thing. It does beg the question, how did a tobacco company gain so much control over this motorcycling event? You see, we have to understand their thinking back in those days.
The late 80s was a time of change for them. A lot of countries started banning TV commercials of tobacco products, so these oligarch companies had to think outside the box.
That's why so many motorsport teams and events featured their signage all over the liveries. And Camel was strongly advocating for the spirit of adventure in its advertising. Look, this industry was extremely rich and targeting the upper class. That's why this rebel, adventurous motorcycle image was so tempting for them. They sold a lifestyle.
And I am also trying to sell you on our Patreon page. If you want to get future updates on projects in written form, that's the best place to get them. No pressure on our end though, back to the video. To give you an idea of the power these companies possessed, during one of the editions of the marathon bike, the crew got stuck in Lima since the airport personnel were on strike.
Nobody was able to fly in or out of the airport. Nobody, except the Camel staff. Their connections and power was so strong, they managed to get the government to enforce an exception and allow them to fly throughout the strike.
I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm not advocating or promoting these companies. But when you look through the 80s and 90s, they are simply inevitable. Really, it's the exact same thing that energy drinks like Red Bull and Monster are doing these days.
With all that being said, I couldn't stop wondering, why would they shut this down? It fit perfectly with the image they were trying to convey. Multiple theories floated around this sudden change of heart, but later, in an interview, Beppe Gualini shared the reality of the day. Look, the marathon bike event was big and only getting bigger. The attention it gathered in such a short time span was unreal. It gathered traction so quickly. In fact, a little too quickly.
You see, Camel International noticed the sudden rise of the event, and this posed a problem.
It started jeopardizing the popularity of their four-wheel drive event, the famous Camel Trophy. They were so afraid that this would endanger their partnership with Land Rover that they had to kill it quickly. And they did. Looking back, the marathon bike really was a one-of-a-kind event. A true adventure test, one that would push man and machine all the way to the limit and beyond, where the little Honda Dominators got to prove their worth.
I'm not sure we'll ever get to witness an event like that, not during our increasingly sterile world, but I do hope we do. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.